Hello and welcome to the Now Spinning Magazine podcast with me, Phil Aston. And on this episode, I'm absolutely delighted to have with me John Young from PROG Rock, fantastic band Lifesigns. John is a celebrated musician known for his incredible versatility and contributions to the progressive rock scene. You're a songwriter, keyboard player, composer, and you've worked with a diverse range of artists from Steeleye Span to Bon Jovi, with a career that spans over 4 decades. Now, Lifesigns is a band that I would describe as English pastoral progressive rock. That's my feeling when I listen to your music. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Lifesigns, if you're looking for a reference point, now this is what I personally feel. If you're a fan of early Genesis, Camel, Flying Colours, Transatlantic, Neal Morse, The Tangent, you'd be fairly close. But Lifesigns is also a very much their own band, and you're about to welcome John first of all.
Thank you.
And you're about to release a live album, I think, in July, and you're about to go on tour. So you're about to embark on quite a busy period for the band. So how are things going?
Well, it's interesting you put it like that, because with being busy, it's a great opportunity for the band, but also the fact is that we're all busy doing other things. This isn't what we do for a living, so to speak. So it's a question of, like, our drummer lives in Malmo in Sweden, our guitarist lives in Baltimore in the States, our bass player lives in Cardiff. So getting everybody back into the same room, our sound engineer or producer Steve has just come back from the Steve Hackett tour. I've been in Canada working with Rillian, and so getting everybody in the same room it's almost like a bit of a celebration in a way when we finally managed to get all the tickets to work, to get everyone everywhere. But yeah, it's great. For most of this month, we're busy. And so we've got a UK tour to start with, just a short one, mainly up north, Manchester, Newcastle, Glasgow. There is one in Milton Keynes. And then we're off to Poland, Germany and the Netherlands, which should be really good fun.
And you actually come back to my neck of the woods around September time, because I'm in Cornwall, and you're playing Truro. Yeah,
we are. Yeah, it's quite funny actually. I saw a mail from somebody that got in touch with me today, who I've not spoken to in a long time. And I said in 2015, well, maybe one day we'll play Truro, and there we are. It's happening. So we try, as a band, to get to as many places as we can, but obviously it's very limited in terms of costs these days.
Of course, yeah.
One of the big bugbears for us is the States, because we have quite a good following in the USA. But to get the band to actually physically play a note, it's $15,000 in visas first. And really, it's just crazy. I don't know how anyone can afford to do it at the moment, especially with newer bands, that's for sure.
Yeah, very true. I'm going to roll the clock back now to the beginning, because you're classically trained, aren't you? Was it Liverpool Metropolitan?
I was head chorister at the Metropolitan Cathedral, and that kind of went hand in hand. I was classically trained, and I didn't know anything about music in terms of popular music, and I was growing up in Liverpool. I mean, what kind of a situation is that? In Liverpool in the 60s, I knew nothing about it. But on one side of it, I used to sing, and for instance, Simon Rattle used to accompany me on the piano and stuff like that. So I mean, from a classical point of view, it was great, and I really enjoyed the more obscure classical pieces. And I think when I was in sixth form at school, somebody introduced me to Led Zeppelin, and that was the end of it. Off I went.
God, that's really interesting, because my wife is a classically trained violinist, and she worked alongside Simon Rattle as well when she was in Birmingham. So that's fantastic. Small world. Yeah. So you encountered Led Zeppelin, but obviously your leaning became more to do with the progressive rock. Who were your early influences in that field?
That's a very good question, because I only thought about it the other day, how bizarre it was, because initially I only had like 1 or 2 albums. I think we all probably started like that, and played them to death. And it was 10 years after, and Led Zeppelin. And then a friend of mine said to me, who lived across the road, said, well, you like music. He said, you might like this band that's playing at the Liverpool Empire tonight. They're called Genesis, and they're doing a thing called The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. Well, that was it. That was the end of it for me. So I blame Peter Gabriel. I actually saw Peter Gabriel at Heathrow. I don't know him, but I saw him sort of from a distance, and I thought I should go over and blame him for everything, really, because that's where it all started. And I just thought it was amazing. And I went the first night knowing nothing. It was the only place they played 3 nights. And on the third night, I knew all the words. And
it is a classic of that genre, isn't it?
Completely.
It really is.
Yeah.
Your first real break is with Uli John Roth's band in the mid 80s, which was, now that you've mentioned 10 years after in Led Zeppelin, I can see that must have been a great step, because, guitar centric music and a well-known name, still is.
Yeah, to be honest, I didn't know who he was when I auditioned for the band.
Did that help, do you think? That you didn't?
Probably, in some ways. I mean, I turned up at this audition in London. There was a room full of Berkeley students, and I just thought, okay, this is pretty serious. And then Uli asked me to do something ridiculous, which was he would keep changing key, and I had to use the correct cadences to follow him into the key, and then he would change key again. You'd have to go and find him again. And I did it for 5 minutes. And this is the story of the beginning of my life. And I put my hands up in the air. I said, I can't do this anymore. And he said, well, that's interesting. He said, you lasted longer than anyone else. And then I said, there was I couldn't find the sustain pedal. And he said, you did it without the sustain pedal? I said, yes. He said, you've got the job. And that was how it worked. So,
oh, wow.
Quite bizarre, really. But one of the beauties of that time was that because I used to go around, Uli was quite fastidious in those days. I don't think he is so much now, but he made me learn a lot of his guitar solos on keyboards. And so that gave me a guitar technique on keyboard, which has stood well through the test of time to an extent.
Yeah, because he used the tremolo arm a great deal. So, so obviously you were able to, through the keyboards, I suppose, and synth sounds, you were able to almost follow that.
To an extent, yeah. Not so much from the tremolo point of view, but certainly from bending. In terms of, I would say that. I mean, he was a master of all those things, and the Sky guitar that he has went, an octave above where it was supposed to, or something. It was an incredible learning curve, and I really appreciate the mayhem that followed over the next year. It was quite fun.
Because then quite quickly after that, you had Steeleye Span and Bon Jovi, Bonnie Tyler, who you were with her band for quite a while. So all of these different styles and things, did they sort of, cement their way into your compositional approach to music?
I suppose I couldn't say no, Phil, but the thing I find interesting is that the gladiators of the 70s, so to speak, the people that we all look up to and we bought all their albums and everything else. Yeah. I was of a generation that came behind that. So, for instance, my next door neighbour until not so long ago was Dave Kilminster, who now plays for Roger Waters, And we've all worked for the John Wettons of this world and together, and, I was in Asia for a bit. And so you learn the techniques of the different bands. And yes, you must add them to your vocabulary without question. But there are some things that I wasn't that keen on. For instance, I had to do the Emerson, Lake and Palmer stuff, but I was never really a big fan. But it was still a learning curve to an extent. So I think they all added to your repertoire. But looking back now, I was talking to Dave about this a while ago. Can you imagine going up to somebody from one of those bands and saying, can you do something outside of your comfort zone? So if you went to a guitarist that you really liked and said, so why don't you play the blues, or why don't you play, jazz fusion, or why don't... They'd probably find it quite difficult because they've only ever had to do that one thing. Whereas I think all the people that came along afterwards had to be masters of various different, or at least proficient in various different areas. There was various things I couldn't do at all, and I'd struggle with. But I think it's one of the things I find fascinating about today's musicians is who can and who can't.
No, that's I've not thought of it that way before. That's a very good point. That you say, they were the first bands to the gate playing that type of music, and they only really had their own kind of walls that they'd built to follow. But the musicians, like you say yourselves, that came up were obviously taking a bit of this, bit of that, learning that, and as you say, went to auditions. They have to learn huge repertoires that went across different bands, whereas they were in their own little world, and they didn't really come out of it. Yeah, so you're right. Exactly. So you obviously you were like a sponge. Obviously, soaking all this stuff, but equally being able to play and interpret so many different things as well. You also you were co-writer on the Fish album, weren't you? Fellini Days. I mean, what was that like?
Working with Fish was it was lots of fun, I have to say. I really like Fish as a guy, and I loved the band. They were lovely people. But it was almost like being in, I don't know, some sort of soap opera from day to day, because there were always things happening, and it was never just simple and quiet. There was always something going on, or some crisis or something happening.
Yeah.
And I loved all that. It was great. And you make some really good friends from it. The humor in the band was fabulous, and Fish is a much larger than life character, and I got to know him pretty well, I think, really over those few years. And also, strangely enough, quite a few of the people involved with Fish over the years, like Dave Stewart, Robin Bolt, Steve Vances, they've all ended up working with me also in some guise or another. Robin's worked on the 3 Lifesigns albums, and Steve and Dave were in the John Young band. So it's a very incestuous sort of scenario.
And of course, Fish was part of Marillion during that part in the mid-'80s, probably when the phrase or term progressive rock was at its lowest marketable element.
Completely. Yeah. I said to Lucy Jordache just recently, because the way that we work with Lifesigns is we've kind of taken the Marillion mantle in terms of the model that they use. Wrong choice of words. The model that they use, and we've turned it into what we need for now. And I think that's what they did by. If you look at the way progressive rock worked through the 70s, it was very much the fans were very much alienated to an extent from knowing the bands. You would go to a gig and you'd all stand outside the door, wait for somebody to sign it. They'd sign it, rush into the car, rush off, and that would be the end of it. Marillion were the first people to take the model of actually, why don't we make friends with the crowd, make them part of what we do? And we sought to do the same thing. And I have actually had to point out to a number of major artists from the 70s, this is the way it works now. These people pay your wages. They care about your music. You have to care about them. And I think probably back in the 70s with, obviously the amount of money there was and everything else, they were a bit more like football stars, whereas I don't think that's the case now.
Yeah, I think bands back then were like mythical creatures that lived on the top of a mountain, hidden behind the mists. And to try and get to them, you had to write a letter using a pen and put it in the post, and it would go to a fan club and they'd reply saying, we'll see if we can pass this on. But
they had to get past the keepers.
They were like untouchable. Whereas now,
completely.
You can actually send a message directly to the person you've seen and say, that was great, thank you.
Yeah.
I recently interviewed a band called When Rivers Meet, who are a blues rock band, and they're a young band, but they're also like you. They are dealing and building a relationship with their community of fans in real time, and that's why they're doing so well.
Well, it's a beautiful thing as well, because we found them then, when we go and do a gig, it's like going to do a gig with your family, and so everybody, like a lot of the fans know each other, and if anybody's new, they get pulled in and everybody looks after them. And there's a wonderful community spirit. And we said the other day that, doing a show is almost like leaving the planet for a couple of hours, because, the planet is in such a terrible state, and you can fall back into music and music can take you somewhere else, and it's such a gift to be given. And I really love it. It's fabulous.
And just before we come right properly onto Lifesigns, you also played with the Strawbs as well. You were a keyboard player about 2010 as well. And you've also done some instrumental albums after that. So this was just a few years prior to Lifesigns. So when you were doing the instrumental albums, which I think were being used in advertising and stuff and TV productions, was that something you've carried on doing more of? And what was that like?
No, strangely enough, I've sort of sidled away from it over the years, because I've just got more involved with writing for Lifesigns and making our kind of music.
Yeah.
But that said, it was a means to an end at the time. I needed to create some income, and it helped. But it also showed you the darker sides of the music business. What's the Hunter S. Thompson phrase? You must know that the music business is shallow trench full with vagabonds, thieves, and murderers, and it also has a bad side.
Yeah,
and so
it's about right.
I found the bad side on several occasions. To give you an example, the war in Iraq, when that happened, CNN had this coverage which used all the newscasters, and the classical music underneath that was me. And I thought, oh, well, that's going to be good. I knew kind of what it should be worth. And they used it for 18 months non-stop through the all over the world. And I got £25.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And I got in touch with them and they said, yeah, that's fine. We know we're using your music. Sue us.
Oh. And they're not even like a small backyard company, are they? A brand.
Bringers of truth and justice to the world.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, great, fine. That's how we work.
So it just ends up something that's on your Wikipedia page or you're in your CV saying, I did this, by the way. But as you say, it's of no value to you as a working musician. Yeah. Well, Lifesign appears in 2013, and this is where I can join in myself, because obviously I bought this album, and I said at the start, Lifesigns are like this pastoral English prog, and that cover, I mean, that image sums up that. I mean, is there a story behind that? The imagery?
Very much so. Yeah, we were very much a family. I mean, there's only, basically we've got 5 in the band. If we include Steve, our sound engineer, is part of the band and has been since day one. And then we've got 3 people we work with on the road. And then we've got Brett, who does all our artwork. And that is a piece of Brett's artwork. Now, I'd commissioned something to be painted for the album, but unfortunately it just didn't really come together. And I'd seen this photo that Brett had done, and I said to him, I really like that photo. So he then enhanced it to be, a Lifesigns photo. And our artwork began from there, really. And when I said to him, so what beautiful scene is it? He said, I took that on the M6 going north. I said, what? And it's true. If as you go up the M6 going past Stafford, on the left-hand side, our album cover comes in 3D. It's just, yeah. So what? I hope we haven't been the cause of any accidents. Or anything.
Exactly, because it'll be one of those things, won't it? As the legend grows, people will be try and be to see themselves waving from that location. I mean, it's also got some of your timeless classics, hasn't it? A Fridge Full of Stars. Not only is it a beautiful piece of music, it's one of the best song titles of all time.
Yeah, I can't really remember. I think Brett and I came up with that one. It's just, we do. And we've also got the happiest song about the end of the world on there as well.
You have. You have. It is. At the end of the world, it's such a jolly tune.
Jolly tune, because I personally don't think it's such a bad thing at the moment. But it's... it's one of those things. I think what we try and do. Dave Bainbridge said to me on the way down the car just recently, we were going from gig to gig. He said, "You know what we do?" And I said, "What's that?" He said, "We bring joy." And I thought, yeah, that's great. That's all. What more could we try and do?
I think I totally agree with that you do. I think your music is. One of the things I was going to mention for instance, on Altitude, their most recent studio album, is that usually for a lot of people, when you listen to progressive rock music, or some people that they think they know it or whatever, when you see, you look at the song and it says, oh, it's 20 minutes long or 15 minutes long, you think, oh, right, this is going to be it's a long song and it's probably going to go off here. It's going to be a big seller. When you listen to Lifesigns, I'm completely oblivious to how long the music is. I mean, for instance, that Altitude, the first track, which is 15 minutes, I was playing it to Sue in the car the other day, and there's that lovely violin playing, which surfaces towards the end, by Peter Knight. And suddenly, and as it was on, I looked at how long the track had been on, and I hadn't noticed it. So the music is intricate, and obviously they are long songs, but they're songs. They're not workouts for the instrumentalist to flex their muscles. They're songs. I mean, how do they come together?
Absolutely meant. It's just, I started, without being boring, I actually work by a process that's called channeling, which you can check up on TEDx. I've been to all the lectures so it just arrives, the music arrives. And I was writing this sort of pleasant song after the intro and thinking, oh, this is quite nice. And, I love flying. I love anything to do with, the sea or the air.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, this is great. And then I was just playing, and then the thing went target destroyed, and I was like, what? Where did that come from? And I suddenly realized that because generally the songs reveal themselves to me sometimes quite late after I've got involved in them, and I suddenly realized that in a drone, and the drone was looking at all the beautiful things, and then the drone killed something, and what have we become, and why are we this? And then it went into the story of the person operating the drone. How would they feel? Everything else. So it became a much longer piece than I initially imagined. But also, one of the things that we do from a musical perspective is that although we're quite progressive, and we're also, a bit of pop, a bit of jazz fusion, all those kind of things, we tend to hide things. So a guy came up to me and said, "Oh yeah, it's all." He said, "Altitude's all right. It's all in 4/4, isn't it?" I said, "Not a chance." It's like, no way. And he said, "Well, what time signatures does it go into?" I said, "Well, one of them is 57/64." And he went, "You're joking?" I said, "No, it's got a 4 underneath it, but you wouldn't know because it's not in 4." But so the thing you do is you disguise all these things, and you just make it flow and blend, rather than going, "Oh, look, here's this bit that we're going into that's going to be,
yes.
Why bother? Just let it flow over you." It's a bit, in a way, Lifesigns I've always described, it's a bit like watching, a swan or a duck or something serenely gliding along, and the feet are going like this, like crazy underneath. And so I do think that, the players that we've involved in all through the 3 albums, have all been magical. And we're so lucky to work with such great musicians.
I mean, talking about the musicians have been in the band or in the band, Jon Poole's bass playing is a key part of the sound, isn't it?
Completely.
Yeah,
totally. I mean, when Jon came for the audition 10 years ago, he was recommended by Ed Poole, who I work with, his brother, who I work with the Bonnie Tyler band.
Yeah,
and said, "Oh, Jon could do this," and other bass players were coming in and going, "Oh, just give me a minute, I'll try and get this bit," because Nick Beggs had done the original album.
Yeah, great player, yeah.
And then Jon came in and just played it and started dancing around the room, and I thought, no question, Zoltan was very similar when he auditioned in terms of just their ability to actually cope with the music was incredible. And Jon's our musical director now. He runs everything in rehearsals, and he's just consummate musician. Can play anything.
It's brilliant. He's got that kind of like Marcus Miller kind of trebly, funky, slap bassy thing but it's so it just fits in with the soundscape that you're
completely. He has a thing on his bass guitar which says "Destroy all genres." I don't know whether you've seen that, but he can play any genre. It doesn't matter if you ask him any questions about punk, new wave, psychedelia. He'll know the answers to everything. It's incredible.
And you were mentioning that obviously what Altitude was about, and obviously it's a dark subject, but just like you said earlier, it's a very joyous song.
Yeah, because in the end, it celebrates that we could be, the whole thing, the clue through that is we could be so much better, because if we put our minds to it, humanity could be so much better than it is. And it's only, I think, a number of idiots that are running everything. I mean, I'm not political, I'm not religious, but common sense dictates that we should just feed everybody rather than bomb them, And
yeah, totally.
I don't know. I mean, call me a hippie. I don't care.
No. I say a lot in my videos that music is the healer and the doctor, and it's music. It's the universal language, isn't it? It's an art form that connects us all.
Yeah, and also it heals. I get messages from people saying that, it's healed everything from personal problems through to physical problems. Our music has brought people together. I mean, you can't ask for more than that in life, really. Somebody said, "Do you want to be famous one day?" I said, "No, I'd like to be heard." That's the difference. I don't really have any. I don't think the industry really has much to do with music these days, sadly.
No, because you can technically work outside of the industry. Like, once you you've got your community and people like you've done. I mean, one of your albums was the target for your crowdfunding was met within 48 hours.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
I mean, that was without a record label, I guess. That was people wanting you to bring out music and support you.
Well, there's a lot of hard work from the team itself. I mean, obviously, aside from the musicians, myself, Steve, and Julie, we all tend to work Julie sends everything out, make sure everything runs. I sort of run the managerial side of it. So you work from dawn till dusk every day. But I remember a record company saying to us right at the beginning, when we said, I don't think we're going to sign, they said, well, you won't last a year. Well, we're 11 years on now, 10, 11 years on. So, I think we've disproved that.
Yeah. On your second album, the one after the Live in London one, which is fantastic, by the way, anyone watching this, you need to get, where is it? I've got it nearby.
Oh, you have everything, Phil. That's great.
I have everything, yeah. And the other one, Cardington, I really like, because I like the last track, which is about the old airship hangars.
Yeah, the R101 and the flight. I mean, it's an incredible story. And what led up to that was I was doing a solo gig in Norfolk, and I came back through. To come to where I live, you have to come back past Cardington on the Bedfordshire roads. Yeah. And I just thought, you know what? I'm going to go and have a look at it in the moonlight. And this was, all those years ago before they built the housing estates that are starting to go around it. And I went down there and I stood behind these huge monoliths and with the moon shining on them. I just thought, you could feel it. You could feel that something terribly special had happened here. And it was indeed beautiful. And so then I researched more about the R101, and I saw these incredible pictures of this immense behemoth with, somebody on a horse, pony, and trap going past it or whatever. And you think, what was it like? We marvel at the Concords and the Boeings and everything else that we see these days on Airbuses, but that must have been incredible. In a tiny remote village in the middle of Bedfordshire, these two monstrosities as far as the hangars were concerned, or the sheds as they call them. Yeah. And then these incredible machines that came out of them, And, within a little, if the song is about the circumstances that prevailed, and the R101 crashed on its what they say it's its maiden flight. They've flown several flights before that. But the story of it and the history of it and the reason they shouldn't have done what they did, if they hadn't have done that, would it have changed aviation? I don't know. Could have done.
Yeah, that's very true. You just don't know. The band Lifesigns they've had quite a few lineup changes, but I think the other thing that I really like about your ethos and who you are, it's almost like a family, is on your website, you also list ex-members, and that's still, in a way, part of it. You talk about their influence and what they did and what they're doing and where, and what they did up to that point. Is that important to you?
Oh, of course, yeah. I mean, we couldn't have done it without the input of everybody through the years. Nick Beggs was on the first album. We didn't have a guitarist for the first album, so we used different guitarists to play on it. So Jacko Jackson came on to play one song, and there was just a number of people. Robin Bolt was the main guy that came in and did most of it. Second album was pretty similar because we were changing at the time because Niko decided to go. Niko had worked for Stephen Wilson, Niko Tsonev. Amazing guitarist. And then, so we had him. We had Menno Hootjes from Focus came in. Obviously, Tyche had been on the first album. Nobody ever said no. This was a very interesting point. And I loved the contributions everybody gave. And then Dave Bainbridge came in and managed to let Frosty was amazing on drums, for those.
Brilliant player. Yeah.
And then Zoltan just came in out again. Great stories with Zoltan. He just came in and everybody was saying it would take them 2 weeks to learn N, the song N. And Zoltan sent it back to us in 3 hours and then apologized for it taking so long, but he had to take his son to school, So we knew then that this was going to be, a wonderful thing. And when we first started rehearsing with Zoltan, John realized what an amazing drummer. Roiner Stolt got in touch with me and said, "You just got one of the best drummers." And Zoltan left at 3:00 in the morning to come to us and then rehearsed through till lunchtime and was probably quite tired. And John was laying into him with all these things they could do. And at one point, John went, "Oh, I'm really sorry, really sorry." He said, I didn't want to, I said, "Didn't realize you've been up since 3. You must be knackered, And Zoltan just looked across the drum kit at John and went, "I love you." I knew a rhythm section had been born at that point, and it was just fabulous. It's been an incredible ride. Some wonderful humor, some amazing things spiritually that have happened with everybody, things that we feed off, and you can see that from what goes on, you're doing the right thing. I think I'm going off subject here, but the epiphany for us was doing Cruise to the Edge last year, where we had a standing ovation after every number. The theatre was packed out right to the back. A lot of the other bands came to see us. A lot of people from major bands that we've all got records of went, "We want to be in your band," And I thought, okay, box ticked. That's what we came here to do. That's what we're doing, and anything else is a bonus, to be honest. So,
and Dave Bainbridge, who's with you now. He's an amazing player, and his background covers so many different. A bit like you're saying about the bass player saying death to all genres. I mean, Dave comes from such a varied background, doesn't he?
It's wonderful. I mean, obviously, he has strong Celtic roots in terms of Iona and everything else. And Dave works, he's very industrious, I love his ethos as far as, getting to grips with everything. There's nothing he'll turn down, nothing he can't do. We had a funny situation with Prog magazine a couple of years ago where I won Best Keyboard Player. And I'm not even the best keyboard player in our band. It's a bit like Ringo not being the best drummer in the Beatles,
Yeah.
One plays great keyboards as well. And now Zoltan's told me he plays keyboards. I feel quite threatened, actually. But it's true, I look at Dave's playing. Dave's a magical jazz player as well. Incredible, absolutely incredible. So talent on the stage is I just sometimes stand there and watch it and just think, how did you end up here? Pete Travis said to me on the plane out to Montreal recently, he said, "You've got an incredible band," and I said, "Yeah." He said, "I don't know how that happened, really."
I think because what comes across is that you're all equals on stage. Yes. I mean, I know that you've got a new live album coming out soon, but on the one that's been out for a while, it's obvious from the musicians that, as they were in that band, and from what you've said, it's always continued. You're all just. Well, there's not one musician, like you can see some bands where a musician is completely in their own little world. They're doing their thing, but they're not necessarily connected to the others. There's a bigger light on this person. There's a smaller light on that person over there. But with Lifesigns, all the lights are the same,
Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree. It's beautifully put, actually, Phil. I have to say, I've had this conversation with a number of people. That one of my problems is when I go and see, especially sort of major acts of the past, then it'll be about a person, or it will be about 4 people all trying to be the person that catches your attention.
Yes.
And I want to see a band. It's like if you go and see Uriah Heep, you go and see a band, and that's what they do. And I think it's really important that this is what happens with us, and I think everyone has respect for each other's abilities and we're all good friends. You can't ask for more than that. John said to me, we've really hit a sweet spot. And I said, yeah, and you can't always guarantee that's going to stay. But as it stands at the moment, I did an interview for a guy on BBC local radio a while ago. We haven't actually managed to get to the halcyons, end of the BBC market. But he said, so how would you describe your music? And I said, deeply unpopular, And he said, why is that? I said, well, we're not played on anything mainstream. I said, nobody will pick that up, no mainstream press. And he said, why would that be? And I said, well, part of the problem could be the BBC. And he stopped the recording and he said to me, absolutely agree with you, So I don't know how you feel about these things, but it's great chatting with someone like yourself who understands music and everything else. But you listen to the BBC radio going, oh, and here's another one from so-and-so. Oh, this is really good. I like this. It's like, what happened to the Bob Harrises and the Alan Freemans and the people that gave you the information you needed to actually make some decisions about proper music, And I'm not saying there aren't good musicians around, but I do feel sorry for, a lot of the younger bands coming through at the moment. And we try and support them wherever we can, because there's some brilliant bands coming through that should be, being played on radio too. Ebony Buckle, who's supporting us at this next gig, she's amazing, absolutely amazing. Her and her husband make beautiful music, but who's gonna be brave enough to go in there and make it happen? Yeah.
I think the media is broken, and the traditional routes to being found, going on, finding your way through to a radio play and then waiting for the weekly music newspaper Sounds of a Melody Maker Enemy to come out on a Wednesday and then to see it and say, look, we've arrived. That can be completely circumnavigated now by YouTube and social media and all sorts of things, and also you're kind of like uber fans, because you don't need loads of them. You just need a few people who just almost broadcast out to their people saying, I found this band, I love them, give them a listen. And it just amplifies in an organic and natural way. So as you said earlier, you've got fans who start to meet up, and meeting each other becomes part of the experience of going to see you live. So when they go to the bar, they go hi and they talk to each other. So they're building relationships with each other, which builds a stronger bond with you, the band.
Completely.
So they're saying on the way out, are you going to go to the gig at whatever? Yeah. And then they say, well, let's meet up, which is, you can't get that from the radio.
No.
So in a way, I agree. The BBC are making themselves, or any radio station that follows the old route, they're making themselves less relevant to the music fans who are looking for something, something new. And again, going back to what you said, your music being deeply unpopular, whatever, progressive rock, the word progressive means that you don't really know what's going to happen next.
Yeah.
Because if you want your band to just keep replicating the previous album, it's no longer progressive technically, is it? It's
No. Well, to me, I mean, a lot of people, the problem is I think there are two kinds of fans. There are ones that want to feel safe.
Yeah.
And there are ones that are more experimental. Now, I was always one of the ones that was a bit more experimental. So, I'd go and see Genesis one day, and then it would be Weather Report the next day, or whatever, that kind of thing. And try and take in all these different facets and see. So I noticed that, for instance, on the cruise, when we had a funny moment because we did our gig on the deck, and I wasn't too happy with it, but I think the sound was okay. It was just purely because it was so windy. And then I had a tap on my shoulder, and it was Simon Phillips. And he said to me, John, could we borrow Steve? Because they obviously liked the sound.
Yeah.
So Simon borrowed Steve for the gig the next day, and we became quite good friends on the cruise, which is one of those things that's wonderful. But I noticed when I was watching Protocol, which is his band, there were a number of proggers walking around looking a little bit like, this isn't prog, and to me, I thought it was exceptional, absolutely exceptional. I used to go on these cruises. I've always been to go and see Brand X or whatever, because I just love the music, but it is an acquired taste, so sometimes it doesn't quite get past that. Yeah. If you want to get past the comfort zone, and I think we push a few boundaries, but we try and do it delicately so that people can discover it as it goes. Because there's at the end of, when we get to the end of Fortitude, there's a big sort of Genesis type element, but then at the end of Shoreline, there's kind of a jazz rock, jazz fusion element, and it introduces people to that and those abilities.
It's also incredibly accessible, which a lot of progressive rock isn't. It can sometimes be very targeted towards blokes of a certain age. In some ways, it becomes like a special club. But I think but what you do, going back to what you're saying about when people are on stage, each member of the band is sharing the light, but all the members of the band are also serving the song.
Yes.
So the song sits above everything.
Gosh, you've got it in one there, Phil. I mean, the song is the most important thing. So basically we realize that we all, we're all owned by the song. And I think it's important also from the point of view, as you said, if it's progressive but it still feels like a song, then there are two elements to it. So you can look for the depth and the structure, or you can just sing along the melody.
Yeah.
And so if you do that, we've been amazed recently. Well, we were amazed originally, but now it's pretty much become the norm, where a guy would come in and go, well, he said, I like it. He said, but my wife likes it as well, and the children like it. That's because we're doing something a little different, I think. So as long as we can keep going like that, I'm happy. I think it's a good thing.
Well, as you said earlier, it's joyous, and there's a lot of melody. There's a lot of melody in the music, and it's incredibly accessible. So it's just about being. It's about being heard.
I think going back to what you were just saying, the songwriting aspect also probably comes from. I spent a lot of time working with John Wetton. I think he was a genius. He had his good days and bad days, as we know. But it was, the things that he taught me through that time about the way you structure something, the way you make something work, the way you can put something, you can still keep something as, would be regarded as progressive, but turn it into something that you might hum. that I always thought was the within progressive rock, that's probably the most important thing. Not get lost in your own self-indulgence. It's not worth it.
I mean, because John Wetton was brilliant at that, wasn't he, with Asia?
Completely, yeah.
Some of those hit singles, and of course, even I think that Yes during that period also had big hits as well.
So. Yeah, I loved all of that, and I loved what he did with UK. I always thought that was, for me, my favourite period was probably UK, Brand X, Bruford, all that kind of stuff, because I enjoyed that. But then again, you could turn around and say, well, there probably wasn't enough melody, And so if you can incorporate the two things and, put some really devious chords in underneath something that sings beautifully, then you're halfway there, I think.
Well, I've mentioned the previous live album, but you have a new one due, don't you?
Yes.
Literally next month.
Yeah. It was recorded in Holland, and we just, we decided that with the altitude thing being accepted so well, that it would be a shame, especially with the band being as good as it is at the moment, it would be a shame not to capture that. And so that's kind of what we hope we've done. And I think it's, we were surprised actually, because we turned up in Holland not knowing. Somebody, was it one of the guys from Focus, said to me a couple of weeks ago, he said, it was amazing what you did in Holland. And I said, it's not out yet. He said, no, he said, it's just the fact that people were standing, singing and clapping.
Yeah.
He said they were singing along, they were clapping. He said, that doesn't really happen in Holland. And I said, I was oblivious to that, So I think that's the thing, is you can get that atmosphere. We found recently with some of the more sort of catchier songs like Impossible and Last One Home, that people will sing them back to us when we've finished the song, So we're seeing all these new things happening, and it's beautiful because it really brings tears to your eyes when you're on stage. It's quite incredible.
You've connected on so many different levels, don't you?
Yeah.
And in a way, I know I introduced the band as being a progressive rock band at the very start, and that can have some people who don't know a band, they make some assumptions on that, but you don't normally think of a prog rock band where people are singing along, they know the words.
Yeah, exactly.
That says a lot. Actually, on the album Altitude, this was recorded all in your home studios, and obviously on the album it actually says in accordance with 2020 lockdown procedures. I mean, that's going to be like a point in time, isn't it? And in years to come, people will see that and think, what does that mean? I mean, I mean, you also recording like that, when you realize that's how recorded, and then you listen to the album, it shows you how recording techniques have changed, because there's no way I would think that you weren't together when that was done.
No, we weren't. Yeah.
You wouldn't pick up on that at all. It sounds, especially as I mentioned, where Peter's playing the violin and all that, it just sounds like you're all in the same room.
Yeah, in fact, strangely enough, the only point where we were in a room with somebody was when we recorded the cello with Juliet Wolfe.
Oh, yeah.
Because we recorded that down at her dad's studio in London. And she's a wonderful classical cellist. And that was the only point where Steve and I were in the room with another musician. So everybody did their own thing. And I was really pleased with the way that it worked, in terms of, because we've always got suggestions, what about this? What about trying that? And I do sometimes have to hold them back a little, because they are very, very good. And so there comes a point where you just wanted to sing and you point out what you'd like to do. And like any band, there's an element of, dysfunctional family. And we all, somebody might get annoyed about something, or somebody might want to do something a different way. But in the end, we come to a community decision. As Steve says, we do everything by community, and he's not always sure that's the easiest way of doing it, but it gets us to the point where we can release the album as it stands, and I think that's shows you how strong the band is, that we can go through these things, and then we'll all go for a pint together when we can, So
yeah, of course.
It's very much, I'm busy organising rehearsals at the moment, but I'm also organising the curry night and other bits and pieces.
Essential, yeah.
Vital, absolutely vital. Yeah.
So how did it feel when you first were able to play live together in front of a real audience? I mean, after all the lockdown.
After COVID.
Yeah.
Well, I think the thing was, we were quite nervous. In fact, that happened here at Milton Keynes. We were quite nervous because obviously it's the first time that we were doing Altitude live. And
yes.
it's a big, it's a big ask. It really is. It's not simple. But I think, again, because it was such a community before COVID, and that built through COVID as well. And then when the album happened, it was so widely accepted by the people we knew. And it's quite funny when we do a show, we'll say at the beginning of the show, any virgins in tonight, so it's always good to see who are the people that have not heard it before. But we've noticed that with that now, there's definitely more women coming, more younger people coming. There's more people being turned on to it. So I think really, to an extent, for all of us, we've all really thrived off, these last few years and what it's brought to us. And anything else is a bonus. Absolutely anything else is a bonus. So, yeah.
With the new live album coming out, are there any thoughts about putting out a vinyl version with the way that vinyl has made a resurgence?
I've been asked that 3 times already today.
Oh, sorry.
Just today, people get in touch saying, can we have, because our vinyl is a thing of beauty, obviously, with Brett's artwork, so we're going to have a discussion about it. I think it is coming out as a Blu-ray at the end of the year. So initially there's the audio, which is a double CD, and that's going quite well. I have to say, it was just on pre-release at the weekend. So it's great. We're a kind of a small community, but growing, shall we say.
Fantastic. And where's the best place for people to direct them to go to buy your material?
Yeah, thanks for that, Phil. It's just us. Just come to the website, www.lifesigns.co.uk. Now, the thing that we've been doing recently was initially when we went to, again, it's the same thing. You're trying to change the way the engine works,
Yeah.
So we initially went to distributors and they were like, no, we can't do this. So, well, we put our prices up. They go, you can't do that. Why? It's just a CD now with inflation should be over £50, Now, a CD, they still regard as being £12, £14, whatever. So we decided last year, it's gone up, it goes up with inflation now every year. All our prices go up with inflation. Our CDs were £20 when they started with the Altitude. We found other bands starting to adopt this because we think it's really important. If music is going to survive, you have to pay the going rate. We're not on Spotify. We don't put anything on there in terms of, we've got a couple of, you can listen to us here and don't forget to go to the website. But we won't fall into that trap, or we refuse to fall into that trap of being bound by everything then going down in price. So when we speak to people that we supply, we say, well, you know what? This price doesn't change. In fact, the only thing it will do is go up. Now, if you take that to the vinyl level, we were at a gig the other night, and we're still selling the second album and the third album on vinyl. The first album is sold out. There isn't a repress at this moment in time. So this guy said, I'll have the second and third albums on vinyl. So he bought them. And he said, I wish I could get the first one. And the guy next to him said, I've got the first one. He said, I've got it from Germany. It was £160.
Wow.
Now that's the way that music with value is seen. So why can't it apply from day one with the bands, and the bands can just afford to make a living? I think it's really, really important. And I've noticed, I've had this chat with Arena and with Pendragon, and I've noticed they're moving up as well now. And I think it's really important. If you want music to survive, you have to put value back into it. That's the only way.
I totally agree with you because, the days of when a CD was £10 or the vinyl album, whatever, was 20 have gone, and you're trying to support the band. And if you're going to spend £25 on a T-shirt, then £20, £25 on a two CD set or whatever seems absolutely fine. And also, Also, I think what I am seeing as well from a lot of people within the Nice Spinning Magazine Facebook group and the community on other platforms is that people now are going more and more directly to the artist, rather than Amazon. In fact, Amazon usually don't have it now. For a lot of, especially new bands or new releases, they seem to be last in line, to get this. And I feel if you're going directly to the artist and maybe it's going to get signed, or you have a signed note that comes with it, it goes back to what you said earlier about those days when musicians were out there on the misty mountain top and you couldn't get hold of them. Now you can talk directly, but you feel as if all of my hard-earned money is going to support the artist in the best way that I possibly can.
No, indeed it is. We're fortunate we can pay the band some money every month, that kind of thing. We can, we're not self-sufficient, and we realize that, but we're going to try and work towards that, obviously. Yeah. But I do feel that it is up to, in terms of the industry and the people buying the music, it's about a game change in your head as to, do you give it value or do you regard it as free? If you regard it as free, then it will just die. Everything will just die. So what you need to do is put the money back in so that people can invest. The thing is that you might say, well, CDs should still be at 1980s prices. Mixing desks aren't, cabling isn't, everything else that we have to use, the iPads, all the bits and pieces on stage, everything goes up accordingly. So, fine. If you want to pay 1980s prices, put the gear back down to 1980s. It's not going to happen. So we need to come into the current age. And I think it's good that people are starting to adopt this. We've actually got a policy on the website where you can pay the going rate for our albums or give us a tip, on top of what we're asking. 1 in 3 give us a tip,
Well, yeah, I mean, because if you go eating out in a restaurant, they'll add a discretionary service charge. So, I mean, and that always feels a bit, you haven't really got the same relationship as you have with a band and some musicians. But with streaming taking up 85% of the market and 15% being about physical releases, those people who support physical music are very, very passionate about making sure that the artists can continue to create music. And so
it's a thing of, just looking behind you now, it's a thing of beauty, isn't it?
It is. It is. It is, and it goes beyond just listening to it. So it's actually having the copy, sometimes just sitting down, even if it's not actually playing, but you can relive those memories of seeing the band just by having it near you. It's not just in your, it's not just in your grey matter. So I do think that's very important. And I think your approach is very healthy,
Good. I'm pleased to hear that.
I really do. Well, thank you very much, Jon, for all of your time. I'm going to put a link to the website, which is lifesignsmusic.co.uk. I'll put that on the website and on the YouTube channel. And all the tour dates are on there, aren't they, as well? You kick off the end of this week, the time of recording this, and you're going right to, the short tour of UK, and then you're off, where is it? Looks like Germany and Poland, is it?
It's Poland, Germany, and the Netherlands, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And are you hoping to go into the US?
We'd love to. I mean, also because, we do have a fairly good fan base there now. But as I say, it really is a question of costs. I think what might happen first is, because it costs you to get into the USA. It doesn't cost you to get into Canada. So we may go to Canada first and do some shows there and see how that works.
Cool. And sorry, the question I should have asked as well before we go is, you've got the live album coming out, but are there plans to do a new studio album?
Yeah, started working on that, started working on some ideas, throwing a few things around between us in the same way that we did with Altitude. And we'll see what comes of it. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thanks again, Jon. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you with me. So thanks everyone for watching and listening, and check out Lifesigns website, buy their CDs, support the band, go and see them live, and also check out Now Spinning magazine as well at nowspinning.co.uk. So thanks, Jon, and take care, and hopefully I'll talk to you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Much appreciated.
So a big thank you to my guest, Jon Young from Lifesigns. And I just have to say, any of their albums, and this one from 2013, Altitude, this is the latest one, and this one, Cardigan, and the live album as well. And of course, there's a new live album out very, very soon, live in Holland, are all worth getting. And this band isn't on the streaming services, so go to lifesignsmusic.co.uk where you can buy signed copies of the album and support the band directly. Absolutely fantastic band, and a great guy as well. And we found that whole band are just superb. So thank you for watching, thank you for listening, thank you for being here. Please support Now Spinning magazine by becoming a patron or a subscriber. Check out the YouTube channel, Facebook group, and all of our platforms, and of course nowspinning.co.uk. See you on the next one. Thank you.